Oh no. Hello. Hi, Tracy. We disappeared there. Good to see you again for another Happy Brain Coach live chat, live thrive, drive, whatever we're going to call it. An opportunity to tune in a week on from our last chat to see what's happening in the world. I think we're in week 2 of lockdown, COVID-19 lockdown. And our coaching practice is diversifying by the moment. What's been happening for you this week in the Happy Brain coaching world?
Hi, Kay. Good to be here. Well, change, I think, has to be the most prominent word, and trying to keep up with it, especially in technology. I think the whole world is finding out about what's available online, and how things work or not, as the case may be. And that, I think, is it's not a scary thing, but it's definitely something that's taxing my brain. I have been shattered these last few days just trying to make it all work and hang together, because it's quite a departure from how I would normally work. But I think compared to some of the things that some people are having to change in their lives, it's a small price to pay, really.
Yeah, and you're talking, well, I know you're talking, we've chatted previously about the technology that we're all suddenly thrust into being able to master, or not, as the case may be. You were part of a group session that I ran yesterday, a Skype call for a number of people, and I've just received some emails today saying really great, really enjoyed listening, but I could only see you as this tiny little circle, and I'm like, oh, but I was doing all those amazing things on the whiteboard. You mean you didn't see them? I didn't know that. And so yeah, we're running, to keep up, aren't we, technologically?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite a theme for a lot of people, being forced to look at being quite creative in terms of how, not just how we do work, although obviously that's the main part of it for you and I, but just how we are, how we do, how we be, because we don't have that human interaction right now. That kind of face-to-face interaction has just disappeared, and that's such a significant part of everybody's lives. But right now it's just not there. So we're all wondering about where else can we find it? How can that actually work in our lives when it's not available face to face?
And there's something else about, of course we can see each other face to face as we're doing now, but we can only really see the top bit. And I guess in our work, although I know you and I have we have of course been doing Skype coaching for a while, but usually after we have met with our clients, we've calibrated them, we've got to know them in the physical sense, and we've got a sense of all of those subtle things, like how they move, how they walk, how they sit, how they respond in lifetime. And it's different when you're sitting and you can only see a small part of someone, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And to see people kind of in a fairly formal setup. Some of my clients have had the headphones and the speaker on, and I don't know yet how that changes the conversation somehow. And the fact that the camera is located, in one place, but I need to look you in the eyes, so I'm not really looking in the camera to look at you,
right.
And all that sort of stuff. And that's not just in these conversations, but talking to my family as well, especially my elderly dad, who, bless him, is he's doing really, really well to get up with the technology. But just doing things like when we're on video calls, putting the phone to his ear because he couldn't quite hear. So, no, Dad, that's not quite how it works.
That's right. Yeah.
So, new world for everybody.
It is so interesting, and we are we are rapidly changing as a society, as a planet. Of course, in response to a life-threatening virus, but it's these kind of little subtle things that are really noticeable and measurable, aren't they? That perhaps in 6 or 12 months or 5 years' time will have adapted, and life will be much easier. I think you told me, I think earlier, that had you heard of somebody who'd had a potato filter on their Zoom? What was that about?
They were on a Zoom call with some colleagues from work, and Zoom has a number of filters and backgrounds and all sorts of things that you can play with. So they accidentally switched on a potato filter, so it turned them into a potato, and they couldn't work out how to switch it off. which I think their colleagues were kind of cool about. I think it was okay. But I think what went through my mind was, okay, so that's not the time to experiment when you're on a call with colleagues. You maybe need to do it somewhere else. I think one of the things I hope will come out of it is that it will make what we have to offer even easier for people to access. Yeah. Because I know, while some people would say, no, I really do want face-to-face in the flesh, work, and that's absolutely fine. Actually, it is very possible over the airways. And I think as we as coaches get even more skilled in that, and our clients start to become a little more comfortable with it, even though they've kind of been forced into it at the moment, that actually it will make it more accessible for people who can't travel or are unable to leave the house for some reason or are a very long way away, that it just allows people to make contact where they might not have felt able to before. Yeah. That has to be a good thing.
Yeah. And I'm already having clients who have previously said, I don't do Skype.
Yeah.
I do, Google Hangouts or whatever. No, I don't do it. If I can't see you face to face, it doesn't matter. And now they've got Skype and Google Hangouts, and so it's really upping the IT game, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's something you were saying about the potato filter, which has really chuckled me, because just this week actually I've written an article which published in a few places around a way to thrive in this current situation, and it's based on one of the Happy Brain Super 6 neurochemicals, which is endorphins, and this is my little token gesture to endorphins, which are our body's natural opiates, as you know. And a way of boosting endorphins make us feel good. They're really important. And right now we need something to help us feel good. And they don't work in isolation. Lots of other neurochemicals and hormones are all kind of boosting around. But if we just focused on that one, sometimes we have to do things that make us laugh and make us giggle, because laughter is a wonderful way of boosting endorphins. And one of my remedies, if you like, for people who are feeling a little bit under the cosh at the moment, struggling, is to find new ways to laugh. And so when you told me about the potato filter, I just thought, you can't, no matter how seriously you take yourself, you would have to laugh if suddenly the person on the screen looked like a potato. Surely you would. That was, one of my suggestions to my readers was, well, let's do something crazy on the screen, like mismatch your clothes, or because what that's creating, as you know, in the brain is it forces the brain to do something different and go to new places. And we call it, in NLP, we call it a pattern interrupt. We interrupt the pattern of, this is how I normally behave. I am normally very serious and I talk in this way and I'm going to stay focused. And when we blow somebody's neural pathways into that new space. It's a wonderful thing. And
Yeah.
I'm always amazed at how there's sort of, I often feel there are two camps. There are people who love laughter and you know, they're just on the next strategy to find something funny in the world. And then there are people who really hold on to being super serious
Mm.
and childish. And they're the ones that I want to sort of break through and say,
Yeah.
ah, do something silly. Put your
And
potato filter on.
yeah, you see that? Okay, that has to just be what we say now, isn't it? Just put your potato filter on, and then we know exactly what that means. I'm reminded actually of a client I worked with quite recently where um, she was really focused on her problem, and I've seen this happen many times, and wasn't going to let go. And I, you know, can think of many times when I've been in that place where I've been so focused on this thing that I am closed to anything else, any other suggestion, anything else that's going on in my world, because this is just taking up all of my energy. And that sometimes that's okay, because you need to put your energy into something to shift it or do something different. But this particular conversation just wasn't being productive at all. And so I did something that to some people might seem a little bit disrespectful to some extent. But I just thought I'm just going to have to do something to move this. So I in the middle of this really intense conversation, I said, "So, what's your cat having for tea tonight?" And like exactly as you described, it just blew things apart, really. And actually, later on in the conversation, served really well to be able to move past and to work much more productively. Um, it was the only thing I could reach for. Just I have to do something.
Yeah.
So now in my head, I have a potato that's going to shift my thinking anytime I need to. Because I think we all do it, don't we? We all get fixated on something and feel like you're going round and round and round the problem to no avail, really, because it's comfortable or it just feels nice. We kind of get a sense of poor me out of it, or being justified in what we've thought or said or done. So sometimes you just need to chuck in a potato.
I love that. I love that. And that has so many meanings in our happy brain world, because Julie, one of our happy brain trainer colleagues, does this amazing potato exercise, which maybe we'll film it and share it sometime soon, to burst belief. So yeah, we've now got two versions of potatoes. But
And
you're
she does
right.
it well.
Oh, does it so well. And yeah, let's keep that as a secret, a surprise. Um, but you know, it is about helping people to help themselves. And sometimes it's not about doing the thing that they want us to do. It's doing the thing that they need rather than they want. And sometimes they need to find new places in their brains to go, and it can be life changing. You know, as you were talking, it reminded me, because I'm sat in my office and I'm surrounded, as you would imagine, by lots of gadgets and gizmos and my normal coaching stuff. And these, I'm going to put these on, but this is what I often do in that same situation. If I can't ask a question to break somebody's pattern or focus intention focused on their problems, I'll just reach up and put these on and just wait and wait and wait. And fortunately, because I can't really see much out of here, that means I don't even get the stimulus. I just wait until I hear that,
Yeah.
and they go through these kind of, they're so annoyed. But ultimately, our responsibility is to teach brains to do something new, and then we can then take them somewhere else.
Yes, absolutely. And it's fabulous when it happens.
No, no. We're very lucky in our job, but we,
Definitely.
yeah,
I know even personally experiencing that and the relief, even though I probably would be cross. If you put those glasses on when I was being really intense about something, I would soon move past it. And I have experienced that where you know, when you look back on it, you just think, oh yeah, why was that such a feature? Why was that such a thing? So it's a great sense of relief you get, I think. Mm.
yeah, and it. Of course, you know, we're not being trivial and we're not being flippant because in any coaching situation, we've established rapport, we've made sure our clients trust us, and you know, we know what the margins are that we can take them to. We've already calibrated that, so you know, just to be clear, it's not a one size fits all. We know what we're doing, and we do it with integrity and with clear purpose, don't we?
Yes, I was just going to say that that clear intention
Yeah.
is essential. Um, that it's about whatever's the smartest and quickest way to move through to solutions.
Yeah. Yes, it's funny. I'm remembering all sorts of funny times where I remember quite a few years ago in an NLP training, one of actually she is a colleague of ours in a bigger sense, and as a coach. And I often do, you'll have seen me do this, use a magic wand and talk about the trapped giggles, the giggle bubbles that are all trapped. And I usually prod somewhere down, you know, the lower leg, and the giggle bubbles sooner or later are going to be released. And then we use all of those Milton presuppositions from NLP, where, you know, it's just a matter of time. And I don't know how soon you're going to notice those certain sensations that let you know the giggles are arising. And, you know, sooner or later they're going to come out, and all of those things. And this particular, and she was a very highly skilled coach in her own right. And she was like, no, I'm not. She told me later, she was like, I'm just not going to giggle. I'm not going to. But I set that language pattern up. Well, you know, the more you try not to, the more it's, you know, just a matter of time. And she did, and it was you know, of course, it was a wonderful thing, because then, of course, as soon as we laugh, we get that lovely chemical bathe that our brains and bodies need. But it was her telling me afterwards, she was so determined to fight me. I'm not going to laugh because she wants me to. But and then see the silliness of it afterwards,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
laughter is such an important well-being way for us all,
yeah.
isn't it?
It's one of the beauty about being around children.
Yeah.
They're so self-conscious in their
Mm.
being a lot of the time. That you know, even the things that they're trying to do seriously are quite often funny, and they're so quick to laugh at themselves as well. They don't, you know, they don't take offence. They don't. They do. They just, and it is like a little bubble, isn't it? Just bursting out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm. So yes, you know, in this tricky time for everyone, laughter is an important aspect of the work that we do, isn't it?
Yeah.
And leading people to at least have a release of the tension and the anxiety, and the worries. It's yeah. It was interesting on a group session that you and I were involved in yesterday. We were looking at some key words that people were wanting some support through, and overwhelm was one of them, wasn't it? You know, that at the moment people are feeling overwhelmed. And it's a general feeling, because I think one of the great things in our work is we see these patterns, and what one client comes to with presents as a problem, we go in our minds, oh yeah, well, that's that pattern again. We see it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Last week we spoke about anxiety and as a pattern. What would you say you're noticing most of maybe this week as the situation and the social narrative is shifting?
I do think it has shifted. I do think there is still much anxiety and fear about current times, but also the future, that projection into the future. But I think I'm also starting to see that people have tended to move from the busyness of setting things up, getting the shopping sorted, are the kids okay, how am I going to do my work online, all of the like the busy bits, and are possibly settling into something else which now is much more around, actually this is awful, I don't like this, I don't like being separated from my friends, you know, a real loss, such a feeling. And I know we were talking earlier about the similarities between what we're perhaps experiencing now and the grief curve, and the work that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is very well known for. And she talks about all the different stages of grief and, you know, eventually kind of coming out of the other side. And she very much talks about not that people get over it, but that people learn to live with it. They almost create a new normal, a new way of being, having had that thing happened in their life. And if you look at that curve and the comparison, I think, with what we're seeing now, it maybe doesn't match exactly, but it's very, very like it from what I can see. And it's almost like people have just kind of dropped into the kind of been through the denial and the anger, and possibly now just dropping into the, actually I really don't like this. I really don't like this feeling anymore. So it's interesting from a sociology perspective to and social psychology, I guess, to stand back and just watch the patterns of behaviour as they're changing. That's something you've noticed as well.
Yeah, well, it triggered an interesting chain of thought in my mind that I hadn't thought of, but everything you say makes perfect sense to me, and it's certainly what I do witness. And it reminded me of a GP telling me many years ago when I was going through a divorce, saying you are going through a period of grieving. It's a bereavement, and it's a bereavement of all of your hopes and dreams and aspirations and all of the things that you had expected for your future. Yeah. And it's like, because we can't predict our futures, not that we ever really could, but at least we've always had a bit of a sense of prediction.
Sure.
Yeah, based on what we know to be true, it's been much easier to predict what we think will happen with some degree of certainty. And right now, that really has been taken away from us. And it will be interesting in the fullness of time to see what sociological models, psychosociological models are produced, and whether or not they do follow a curve that, like the one you've described. It is, and yeah, I mean, there are just so many things that as a result of that. But I think your point about suddenly people are saying, and I've noticed this week, some pretty well skilled people are, I wouldn't say they're having meltdowns, but they're really struggling. People that have surprised me, and it's good that they're able to share and be open and honest about it, are just saying, hey, do you know what, I'm really struggling right now. And I have to say the common denominator seems to be at home with kids and trying to get on with life with children, and with all of the restrictions and the fears all kind of in this big cauldron of mixed emotions. It's a tricky time.
And I think we've all been aware over the last few weeks in the media of kind of final year students, whether at school or university, or I know somebody who wasn't able to take all of her final exams to be a doctor, and the uncertainty that that's all caused for many. The initial, yay, I don't have to do my exams, through the realization, but actually that means I haven't got a result. That actually I feel a bit cheated because I haven't been able to do that. So that sense of loss of being able to demonstrate something, and the uncertainty about, so what does that mean then? What, when I go for my first job as an 18-year-old, what do I actually write down as my results? How does that actually work? So even for something that most people would claim that they don't enjoy, an exam, even that, there's a sense of loss, of what was expected, and then suddenly it was removed with no warning. Interesting times.
Yeah, that's so true. And I wonder also, just thinking a little bit ahead, to how the work market will change, because the way that our economies are organized, or are going to be organized in the future, and the way that we've suddenly learned to live without X, Y, and Z, and maybe that will be a trend for the future. What kind of jobs will there be more of? Will there be less of, as a direct result of where we're at right now with the COVID-19? It's quite a fascinating idea, and you think about people young people who've perhaps put all of their hopes and dreams on being something very specific, and now that kind of future may not be available to them.
Yeah, certainly not right now. Anything.
And who knows? There are. Yeah, I mean, the whole economic, we've talked a little bit about the psychosociological aspect of where we're at, because that affects us as coaches. But of course, the economic impact of this is also affecting our clients and customers, and driving the fear as well.
Yeah, I know we've talked a little bit recently about values, and either individuals' values or society's values, and haven't we seen a big shift, at least overtly from what I can see, to really looking closely at who is it in our world who's actually keeping the world turning right now. And it's those people in the NHS, obviously, as an obvious one, but the people who empty our bins, the people who are still serving in shops day after day, the people who are caring for people who can't care for themselves. And traditionally, those jobs are not highly paid. They tend, there's an argument about whether or not they are, but they're perceived to be not highly skilled. There is this perception about, that they're not really jobs that anybody wants. That's debatable. But actually, they're the people who are keeping our country going right now. And so even that kind of shift away from what or who we thought were important has just brought something else into focus. And for me, that can only be a good thing. That it's really demonstrating the value of things that perhaps we've not really taken seriously before, and we've discounted and maybe put our faith in things that actually were built on sand.
Yeah, I so agree with you, and I think it's such an important point. And I guess that's why I was sort of clumsily trying to get to with this idea about how the jobs world will change. But actually underpinning that is how we value certain jobs in society. And so I often have a little musing about, if I was building an ark, for Armageddon, who would I have on the ark? Who would be the really important people? And it's an interesting philosophical exercise, intellectual kind of stimulation, really, because it gets you thinking about, as we have to right now, who do you really need, not want, but need to keep your arc afloat. And we're seeing some tremendous appreciation for some amazing attitudes and skills that we've, as you rightly say, have previously not appreciated. Perhaps I'm loving seeing when I go out and walk my dog once a day, the rainbows in the windows, and the little notes. I've seen notes on the dustbins saying, "We really appreciate you. Thank you for all that you do," and it's quite heartwarming, really.
And really side clapping for carers again tonight.
Well, apparently, I've only just discovered this afternoon that they're doing it again, and yes, last week I found it highly emotional, and it made me feel unexpectedly kind of grateful. I didn't have it on my radar, and I got a text 5 minutes before it was due to happen from a neighbour, so sort of dashed outside, and it was just the most wonderful experience to hear the whole neighbourhood resonating with gratitude. And it got me thinking about two things. Well, I was touched emotionally by it all, but it got me thinking about those ancient practices of feng shui where you would clap to disperse negative energy, and what wonderful thing we need, for the world right now. And secondly, it also got me sorry, Tracy, suddenly the screen disappeared there. Anyway, you're back. And the second thing it got me thinking about was that whole essence of gratitude that each human was feeling was really powerful themselves, and then for the collective, and then to put that essence, that energy out into the world can only be a good thing. There are lots of studies that show that collective prayer practices in synchronized times have massively affected the crime rates across the world, and we don't really understand how that works, but yeah, it just got me thinking about all those different levels of this being a very important activity. So yes, I will be there, and I will be clapping, and
of course what we put out comes back, doesn't it? Which is just another way the universe kind of looks after us, really.
Yeah, and feeling another little aspect of pride for all of the key workers, from everyone that we've alluded to, but yeah, those that I know that are on the front lines doing their bit. You feel a little bit proud, even by association. We've got to grab those good feelings when we can.
Absolutely. I think just highlighting them, but bringing attention to them is really, really important. Yeah.
So Tracy, that 20 minutes ran over by 13. It's so easy to chat, and thank you so much for your time, as always. I love the way that we catch up and share our little part of the world, and hopefully inspiring. So onwards and upwards with Happy Brain Coaching and everything else that we both do and involved in and believe passionately in, and supporting the collective, particularly at this difficult time. So see you again, hopefully same time. Well, maybe not same time, but next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Look forward to it. Speak to you soon.
Take care, Tracy.
And you. Stay well. Bye.
Bye. See you.